Just a quick disclaimer to get out of the way at the start here. A lot of this was finished a good few months ago. The majority of the video was done around the time Shadow vs Ryuko and Lex vs Doom were coming out. This means that some stuff is going to be a little outdated, and I don't have it in me to get anyone to re-record for the sake of it. I doubt this would change the matches anyone chose, except me probably, but I just want to get this clarified before I get comments like, "What do you mean, Steven vs Star already happened?" With that out of the way, I've done videos on how I would put together Death Battle season lists, as well as the episodes I want overall the most. And of course, not everyone's gonna like these matches. I definitely have a soft spot for my fair share of cringe. So, how do I put together a potential season list that satisfies everyone? Well, I gotta branch out to more matches than just my own personal taste. That's why I've enlisted the help of 7 of my friends here to help me put together a full season list. Say hello, everyone.
Like hell he is!
Lovely. So how I went about this was I split the full 16 episode list in half. 8 sprite episodes and 8 that would be done in other animation styles. 1 live action, 2 hand drawn, 2 SFM and 3 in-house 3D fights. As of writing this, the most recent death battle is Lex vs Doom, so I have no clue how they distribute animation styles across a modern 16 episode season. This is just pure guesswork on my end, which I'm also doing to make sure things get distributed between everyone here evenly. How the episode selection worked was everyone picked a sprite match and another fight in a different style, and then I put them all together to make a season list that, while I highly doubt anyone will like all of the episodes, will hopefully have at least a few matches for everyone. Now, since this is mostly going to be out of my comfort zone and I'd have no clue what the fuck I was talking about for the most part, you know, like in every other one of my videos discussing hypothetical episodes, everyone here is going to be voicing over their own segments so they can explain why they picked their episodes and what they'd want from them. And because these are mostly subject to change during production, I'm not going to have anyone explain why I had their match as the premiere or finale or whatever. I'll go over all that at the end. So without further ado, let's start off with the season premiere.
Oh shit, it's me! I'm Nemesis! Can't wait for the fucking brilliant comment saying Biff just started this with his own shit. Fucking genius comments, you guys. Nemesis, Biff, the same person. So fucking funny! Maybe you should go reinvent the fucking description of comedy in the fucking dictionary. Brainiacs. So we can all just say, right, that our most wanted episode of Death Battle is Destoroyah vs Oris, and it goes in the 3D section. As a premiere, which I definitely knew when I was writing this script. And after talking about it so much on my channel, you might be thinking I have nothing left to say. Wrong! So first off, obviously the connection's very solid and thematic. I've brought it up enough times. Animation potential is there by virtue of them being kaiju and Iris not being as slow as most kaiju due to his tentacle answers. And Destoroyah loves to spam long range attacks, so that's great. Oh fuck, it's dawning on me. Ben's going to completely fuck up the pronunciation of Destoroyah into Destroyer. Honestly, that's not the worst he could do. At least it's not destroy you. But also in that animation potential, there's some potential to do some really cinematic shots. Both Destoroyah and Iris have some brilliant cinematic shots in their films where they unveil their final forms fully for the first time. And due to one being on the ground and one being in the air, you can reference both in the animation at different times. Maybe even swap it around, with Destoroyah unveiling his wings in a very unsettling, demonic way under the moonlight, and Iris being caught up in an explosion but rising back out of it barely harmed while the fires rage around him. You could have some cinematic shots of the two flying over the battlefield, throwing attacks back and forth before coming back down to the ground, or even flying higher up into the sky. You could have one shot down and falling straight to the ground in a big impact. And of course there's potential for a scene where the camera goes into Iris's body and we get to see Destoroyah's cells consuming, breaking down and assimilating Iris's as micro Destoroyahs start to grow within his body and burst out of his arms and shit. That's really fucked up when I say it out loud. But then I feel this might be too unfocused and distinct from my personal connection to the matchup, so let's talk about that instead of being so clinical. I've mentioned on my channel and Scene Selection before that Godzilla is a very important series to me. It and Transformers kind of defined and shaped my tastes. I like big things beating the crap out of each other in fights, and while I also grew up on Chinese action films, meaning I also like really well choreographed normal people fighting, it's the giant ones I have more attachment to. It's rarer. There's way more examples of human-sized people fighting than there are kaiju fighting. Don't try to act like that's not the case. I will hunt you down. There are more Marvel comics of characters who are regular-sized fighting than there are kaiju films, period. And amongst the Godzilla timelines, the Heisei one is my favorite by a pretty decent margin. Things like Godzilla's subtle characterization, the tight continuity, consistently appearing characters I give a shit about, progression of Godzilla and humanity's development against one another, Little Godzilla's growth, and the mixture of legacy kaiju and original kaiju, it all works for me. And of course, one of the things that makes it is the ending. Godzilla vs. Destoroyah is my personal favorite Godzilla film. It's not the best, but A big part of why I like it is Destoroyah himself. He's such an intimidating threat, going from slaughtering fish in an aquarium, to people, to Godzilla Jr., to taking on Godzilla himself and towering over him. The way Destoroyah grows and becomes stronger over and over in the face of adversity solely on his quest to kill things is something I just enjoyed seeing. On the other side of things, the Gamera and Rebirth of Mothra trilogies are the only two other pieces of kaiju media I experienced in my youth. The Rebirth of Mothra trilogy is great, but we're not talking about Gauss vs. Dagara, and Gamera, well, it has a very small roster of about 4 kaiju, but they were all great, and all kaiju that I really like. Iris especially. I like the story of Iris and Ayana and how it bounced off of Gamera and his actions in the first movie, and one of the things I like about this matchup is the thematic cohesion the two have with their origins. They were both created to deal with the main kaiju and awaken at this point in time and attack them due to actions in the first movie in that timeline, and how the heroes in that movie killed the main threat in ways that didn't really take into account all the factors of the life around them. And like, if we're to talk about the music potential, well, I mean, first off, there's GM's Final Destruction, which is great, and you should listen to it. I didn't commission that, by the way. Ben made it for my 10,000 subscriber milestone because they're just that cool. But there's also other great tracks in the Heisei era timelines to pull from. So essentially, what we have here is a very thematic matchup between two woefully underused franchises with plenty of animation, cinematic, and track potential that has a connection to me and involves two of my favorite kaiju from two of my favorite timelines and two of my favorite franchises. Why wouldn't I want that? Oh, and Destoroyah vs. Fin Fang Foom is fucking awful. The connections basically begin and end with them looking vaguely similar if you're completely colorblind and squint really hard. Bad matchup. Fuck off. King Ghidorah makes way more sense for Foom.
Hey all, Grifflepuff here, or as you guys probably know me at this point, Combo Breaker. Looks like my good friend Biffweed has actually allowed me to pick out 2 of the fights for this season. Let's hope that's not a mistake. Anyway, first up I'll be talking about my sprite fight for the season, and that would be my most wanted death battle, Joker from Persona 5 versus Ness from Earthbound. Now, to a lot of you, this matchup seems really out of left field, especially since both of them have far more obvious opponents in Giorno and Frisk respectively. However, Joker and Ness actually have a shit ton in common. Both of them are teenage RPG heroes who have their RPG set in a somewhat modern day world. Both of them go on epic quests to defeat an evil godlike entity where they meet plenty of new friends along the way, and both of them awaken to a power that puts them far beyond the rest of their team, in the form of Satin Isle and the truth of the universe. On top of that, both of them are somewhat pacifists and refuse to kill their opponents whenever possible, and they're both in Smash Brothers, which is just a fun little extra connection. Now, the reason I picked this as my sprite battle for the season is because Joker has worked well in sprites before, or at least Origin the Hero did a really good job with his Joker sprites. On the other hand, though, Ness's home game is on the SNES, and thus his particle effects lend themselves to sprites a bit better than 3D, at least on the budget Death Battle has. Obviously, they can look really good in 3D. I mean, just take a look at Smash Brothers. They look gorgeous in that. It's one of the reasons I love playing Ness in that game so much. But Death Battle definitely doesn't have the budget of Smash Brothers, and if they did, God knows what kind of figures they'd be buying and looking at the feet of. Ugh. But most importantly, I think this episode could have a really badass fight scene where the fighters push each other to their limits and exhaust every resource they have. Watching Ness's PSI attacks and Joker's personas interact could be a really dynamic fight where they put a heavy emphasis on status effects and out-of-the-box combat strategies. Just imagine at the end of the fight with both fighters near death, and Ness tries to finish Joker with a PK Flash, going for some non-lethal finisher, only to have Joker dodge out of the way stylishly and land an all-out attack that Ness barely blocks with his remaining PSI energy to activate the shield ability, leaving Joker with one option, to summon Satin Isle and finish Ness off with his most powerful attack, the Sinful Shell, which causes Magic Ant and the Metaverse to collapse, making Joker wake up in Shibuya in the end of the fight. Now, if that didn't get you fucking pumped for this fight, then just realize we'd get to avoid dealing with GER on Death Battle, as well as timeline resets via Frisk. And instead of having to deal with that headache, we'd get an incredibly close fight with beloved RPG heroes. Plus, the track would be baller as hell. Persona 5 already has one of the best soundtracks of all time. Just mix in Earthbound's amazing earthly sounds, and you could make a really unique track. Now, I would go a little bit more in depth on the outcome of this fight and who I think wins and why, but I think I'm running low on time, kind of hard to tell while I'm recording, so I'll leave it at this. Ness is a shitload faster, but Joker's a shitload stronger, but only Joker can straight up counter a large part of Ness's arsenal, which means he'd probably come out on top more often than not. Anyway, I'll go ahead and pass the mic to someone else, and I'll see you when I cover my second fight a little bit later.
Hello gamers, I am Psydude, the Epic Gamer, and I want to thank Biff Weedington for letting me join this epic video. I promise that this is not a mistake at all. So when it came to picking a choice for my Sprite episode, it was actually decently difficult because I had a choice between Archie Knuckles versus the Juggernaut or Akuma versus Raoh. I eventually went with Akuma versus Raoh because I just like that matchup more. It's like my most wanted death battle. So, fuck you, that's the matchup. I know Garo is like a fine matchup for either of them, but like you can't discipline him, so like how the fuck would the fight go? Just instantly stomp. This matchup doesn't seem too thematic at first, but they actually have some pretty solid connections. Both are wielders of an ancient, highly destructive martial arts ability made for killing who desire nothing more to become the most powerful man alive. Both went against and killed their masters and are the antagonists of a wandering world warrior. For Raoh, that's Kenshiro. For Akuma, that's my comfort character Ryu from Fortnite. I think the fight potential for this matchup is really cool. The way these two's powers would clash, the exchanges, the music potential, just basically Akuma versus Shao Kahn, just better in every single way possible. Fuck Akuma versus Shao Kahn. What a stinky shit matchup. I hate it. Gross. Get out of my face. As to who I think wins, I would say Raoh. Sure, Akuma has fought people that use people's pressure points against them like Gen, however, Raoh's pressure point attacks are generally more potent. Plus, he's stronger, and fucking Muso Tensei just kind of shits all over. Personally, to make the fight more fair, I would use the Udon comics, even if they're not canon, because I like the idea of Akuma being continent level, sounds very nice, and I like it. Although, Ryu was in Fortnite, so actually, I think Raoh probably dies. So sorry. Also, I want a joke in the analysis section for Raoh that mentions Boomstick's dead because of Ryuken. That'd be really funny. I would laugh so hard. Please, Death Battle, make it happen. That'll be really funny.
Next up is my SFM fight, and I mean, do I even need to say it at this point? I almost went with Slenderman vs Octodad, but like, come on. Of course I'm going to go with All For One versus the Annihilator. That's about as shocking as Death Battle revealing another Marvel vs DC fight. I've explained the connections to this match in another video, but the TLDR is that they have similar stories and aesthetics, on top of the ability to steal others' powers and use them for their own. Plus, I'm just genuinely interested to see how the verdict would play out, because as much as I've memed this match for the last year or so, I still have not looked into the Annihilator and how strong he is, so I am legitimately interested to learn about him and what he can do. As for how the episode would play out, there's a lot of potential to play around with different tones, since you've got a Disney shitcom character against a serious shonen character whose whole shtick is paralysing every hero around him with pure fear just by being there. Annihilator would mostly have to carry in terms of any jokes, but All For One's serious demeanour could lead to some interesting interactions between the two beyond just jokes. You could maybe have their high and mighty attitudes get slowly thrown away as they take more and more damage from each other. Also, the SFM slot being the only one left for me worked out because I think that's the style that would fit this match the best. Tons of different powers getting thrown back and forth with minimal hand-to-hand combat. Take a look at the 4 SFM fights we currently have and tell me that doesn't match their strengths and weaknesses perfectly. The finisher could be something really special as well. No matter how it ends, the winner has to take the loser's powers before the killing blow is dealt. If All For One wins, he's got to have one last moment where he finally strikes pure, unbridled terror into the Annihilator before crushing him with that big fucking quagmire arm. If Annihilator wins, he can poison All For One and take his powers, leaving him on the ground unable to move or even see, since his sight comes from one of his quirks as most of his face is scar tissue. Annihilator can get ready to finish him off, but then stop and walk away, leaving All For One to slowly suffer and succumb to the poison as payback for all the damage that All For One caused to him. Every day I want this fight more and more, and while All For One's 2 bigger matches have more connections than I initially gave them credit for, I still stand by this being my absolute favourite. Mainly because the other 2 consist of a character I don't know and one I couldn't care less about despite loving his series. Also, I've heard Toichiro and Chrollo Lucifer suggested to fight each other, so it's not like All For One versus the Annihilator would drop either of them if the chance to be on the show. If anything, from what I hear, it just means one of them doesn't have to get stomped into the dirt now. While it isn't quite my most wanted matchup right now, this would be the reveal to get the absolute biggest reaction out of me.
Scooby Doo vs. Courage the Cowardly Dog sounds like it would be a hilarious fight for Death Battle to do. It seems like, with Samurai Jack, Danny Phantom, Jake Long, and potentially Steven Universe, Death Battle is more willing to use cartoon characters now, though they've mostly been using action-based cartoons. But using characters like the Mask shows that they're willing to use Toon Force characters. So I ultimately chose this match. Scooby and Courage are pretty often compared, and I'd like to see how they play off each other. In the Death Battle cast, they seem to express interest in this fight after having done it for a community battle, so it's at least on their radar already. It would be fun if they did the door gag somewhere in the fight. Maybe Courage could scream hard enough for a hole to form around Scooby, and then Scooby could briefly run on air before falling down. Stuff like that would be fun for this fight. As for who would win, it's pretty tricky. I also did this match on an older show of mine, but I don't agree with the logic I use there. Both of them have weird cosmic feats, with Courage shattering the sun, and Scooby seemingly dancing hard enough to break their universe. So if we use that more cosmic stuff, I would say Scooby has it. But those feats could be passed off as outliers, and with their more basic feats, I'm pretty sure Courage has done crazier things that put him higher. Plus, I've seen him regenerate from much more than Scooby, probably because Scooby isn't always getting battered for a comedic effect. This isn't concrete, but for right now, since I think Death Battle would agree to the cosmic feats being outliers, I'll side with Courage winning. But I can see Scooby pulling it off. It's a long franchise, and I bet I've missed something. Anyways, Scooby Doo vs. Courage the Cowardly Dog takes my vote for what should be the next cartoon fight they do.
Big shock, this is a matchup that I really want. Lupin III vs. Kaitou Kid is a matchup that means a lot to me. Lupin III is one of my all-time favourite anime series. Magic Kaitou not so much, but Detective Conan is my all-time favourite, and some of the best episodes of that series are the Kaitou Kid episodes. Lupin III and Detective Conan both crossed over, and at the end of that movie, they teased a Kaitou Kid vs. Lupin movie, which was promptly shot down as a joke. So hey, might as well make it happen with an actual versus show. I have kinda done this match myself. Multiverse Match did this as an episode, which I had a very big part in, doing the research and editing, plus writing it alongside the titular hosts. It's, to this day, still one of the biggest passion projects that I've ever been able to get made. With that said, that episode was made with the budget and resources of an indie versus show. To see Death Battle tackle it, it'd be glorious. These two both have such great personalities that would bounce off the other so perfectly. They're both so confident in their craft, but Lupin shows it off with his fun-loving demeanour, willingness to take bold risks at any turn. Kid, meanwhile, brings showmanship that always makes him feel untouchable, making others see him as perfect and ready for anything. But when either get caught off guard, you'll see a goofier and more animated side to them. Neither can be prepared for anything. They can either act like they can roll with any punch like Lupin, or just act like they actually are ready for anything like Kid. These different styles, coupled with so many similarities in disguising proficiency, accessibility to the likes of knockout gases, flashbangs and grappling hooks, they're even both skilled sword fighters. I stand by this being one of the most underrated matchups in Versus history. It would be so amazing to see Death Battle use two anime that rarely ever get to shine in Versus debating too.
Nintendo has had a lot of Death Battle episodes, none of which have been Fire Emblem characters. Big shock that I'm asking for this, I know. Even for how oversaturated the series is to most people, it's crazy that somehow F-Zero got in before it. I'm half expecting Animal Crossing to make it in before Fire Emblem at this point. But I can dream. There are quite a few matches I think would be cool for the series. Marth vs. Erdrick and Lucina vs. Grovyle are both pretty great, but not my favorite. Edelgard vs. Kylo Ren is also good, and it includes my favorite Lord from the series, but I just couldn't care less about Kylo. Traitor! Instead, I've opted to occupy a 3D spot with Byleth from Fire Emblem Three Houses and the Traveler from Genshin Impact. The male Traveler is Aether, the female Traveler is Lumine. I'm just gonna call them the Traveler. Both of these characters have a sealed power that they must unlock, journeying with a female spirit-like entity and meeting a colorful cast of established warriors aligned with a church. What I think I like most about this fight, besides it introducing two of my favorite series to Death Battle, is that this would have the most potential for a creative animation in regards to the Fire Emblem fights I listed. The Traveler's entire shtick is that they can gain and control all the elements from the statues of the Seven: Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, Geo, Animo, Electro, and Dendro. Granted, we've only seen them use Geo and Animo so far, but it is implied they will gain all these powers down the road. Byleth Bad has dozens of different classes and relics they can swap between too, but I see Death Battle sticking with the one Smash gave the Professor: Amir, Erdbar, Failnaught, and the Sword of the Creator. I don't see them swapping weapons for Marth and Lucina, so this is another reason why I prefer this match, as well as just liking the characters more. I'd like to see something similar to the Ryu vs. Liu Kang DBX in this fight. In that episode, the two swap between sprite styles of Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. In this match, I want there to be a visual flair that swaps the two between their gender counterparts. Male Byleth and Aether even share an English voice actor, so I think it'd be cool if both male and female Byleth and Travelers were voiced by the same person, giving different performances. You could also have Sothis and Paimon, but I don't think people would care if they weren't voiced. Have Bybad reverse time with Divine Pulse. Have Traveler use their Sixth Sense, Elemental Sight, to get the drop on Badleth. there's a lot of things they could do to make it stand above an ordinary sword fight. As of right now, Byleth should take this pretty handedly. Have the kill be something brutal, showcase how it's more grimdark than most Nintendo series, maybe showcase how each of the hero's relics killed a character in the game. Spoilers, such as Eredbar Impaling Traveler, having them get crushed by a mirror, get blasted by Failnaught, ending off with Progenitor God Ruptured Heaven, with the final shot being the game over screen or their victory animation. Not only would this make for 2 new series, but it would bring in 2 modern characters. There's actually only a handful of characters that Death Battle has featured who made their first appearance after the show was created. On the topic of modern characters, however, thank you for scheduling me twice in a row, Biff. Very cool. I think this list has made it abundantly clear that we want to see more modern cartoons on Death Battle. The ones we have got, it's only really with characters Ben, Chad, and the rest of the team seem to have grown up with, like Scrooge McDuck, Bucky O'Hare, and Goliath, which is all fine and good. They've gotten a little better with this recently, given Danny vs. Jake happened, and presumably Steven vs. Starwill. But like any medium, I think cartoons shouldn't be an exception or an outlier, slated for just 1 matchup per season, when anime and comics get like 5. As for modern cartoon characters, there was really no other choice to me than Finn and Jake from Adventure Time versus Mordecai and Rigby from Regular Show. Unfortunately, Mordecai and Rigby will not be fighting the Ghostbusters. For anyone who was watching Cartoon Network in the early 2010s, you for sure know about these 2 duos. Often one of them running after the other on the time slate. They've crossed over in the comics, video games, but never in a combat-oriented sense against each other, to my knowledge. Both were too new for Punch Time Explosion. There's a lot you can do with these characters, with multiple seasons to each of their names. Finn is a sword fighter, and Jake has stretchy powers. You definitely know about those. But they also have wizard magic, Jake's imagination, and have wielded a lot of different weapons. The Finn sword is their strongest to date, but seeing them pull out stuff like Scarlet and the Grass Sword just for the sake of fan service would be really nice. I think this whole episode would just be fan service, honestly. Mordecai and Rigby could bring all sorts of different things like the power, their Death Kwon Do, to the various laser guns they had at the show's last season. The 2 would play off each other completely differently, with Finn and Jake having more of a focus on coordinated teamwork given their experience in training. Mordecai and Rigby, on the other hand, would be using each other to their advantage. They'd be butting heads during the match. Adventure Time can get pretty grim dark, but even then Finn and Jake make less raunchy jokes than Mordecai and Rigby, so seeing them playing off each other personality-wise would be fun too. Then again, Jake is John DiMaggio. As of right now, I think the only tag team matches we've had on Death Battle, I might be wrong, are Ratchet and Clank versus Jack and Daxter and Pokemon versus Digimon. But both of those 2 had basically one party member primarily take a backseat in the action, while this would be a 2-on-2 more akin to Dante vs Bayonetta. The track would need to be something that accompanies lyrics, with Regular Show's emphasis on 90s music and Adventure Time having a lot of more mellowed songs. As for who wins, I have no clue. I've heard a huge variance in terms of stats for these 2, or 4, all across the board. I think this fight would go to stellar levels, given how Regular Show ended. Put me at gunpoint to make a split-second decision, I guess my gut is telling me that Mordecai and Rigby would win? Their arsenal of weapons seems a bit more versatile and destructive, and again, that finale, man. That was some Gurren Lagann level stuff. If Death Battle could replicate that, that'd be a perfect way to break apart the season. Since this is episode 8, there'd be a break for some quirky DBXs. Oh man.
Star Trek and Star Wars is one of the most major rivalries Death Battle hasn't touched on yet, even after a handful of Star Wars matches have been made already. Seems like the most common one debated, even before Death Battle, or really the internet being widespread at all, was the Enterprise versus the Star Destroyer. But that one is harder to figure out how to pull off, for multiple reasons. So I instead go with the on-ground fight of 2 roguish captains, Captain James T. Kirk and Han Solo. I picked this as a live-action match because both characters are mostly seen in that form. I'd like actors for this that can pull off William Shatner and Harrison Ford impressions well, or at least portray the characters well enough. If I were recommending actors, Anthony Ingruber or Jamie Costa are YouTubers both noted for their Harrison Ford impressions, as well as bearing some resemblance, which could be shown off even more through proper hair and costuming. William Shatner impressions are fairly common. You just need an actor decent at portraying him and carrying themselves in a similar way to him or Chris Pine. Anyways, on foot, I think it's a fairly even battle. Both are armed with quick-shooting sci-fi pistols, and both have gotten into some scraps with aliens. With extended cannons and all that, I'm not sure who wins. But in the Star Trek show, I've seen Captain Kirk throw down physically more. Although I've also seen this picture of Han punching a giant otter. I feel bad for the otter. Regardless of who wins, I think it'd be fun to see both bounce off of each other. Given the choreography of old Star Trek, it'd be a lot different than the other two live-action fights in that sense. So yes, I would focus more on the characters, their tactics, and interactions. But Captain Kirk has to do that weird thing where he holds his fists together and hits the guy in the back at some point. The guy being Han in this case.
Oh hey, it's me, I'm back. Bet you expected that. I don't know where I'm going with this. So when it comes to the topic of a sprite fight, I do have more options available for me to choose, and I'm not dead set on a single one, but who am I kidding? It's Beast Wars Megatron versus Fate James Moriarty. I've talked about this matchup before. They're very similar as characters, their roles in the narrative are similar, their plans are similar. You can go watch this video where I give connections for it, because even on this channel I gotta promote my own content because it has more of me in it. As for this matchup, outside of connections, it does have pretty decent animation potential. For one thing, Beast Wars characters in the original series are pretty definitively not the size of giant robots. I mean, here's Megatron next to Optimus. So that issue some people seem to have with Beast Wars matchups just doesn't apply. Secondly, their level of destructive capacity is honestly not too far off. Megatron blows up the top of a mountain, and Moriarty doesn't do much destructive stuff himself, and he doesn't directly engage with any of the fake characters who do the destructive stuff, like Tamamo throwing the sun, or Space Ishtar shooting a galaxy with another galaxy, or Mecha Ellie-chan punching a Big Bang, or Gilgamesh chucking 3 galaxies like he really hates ghost pigeons. The two basically go around in situations where blowing up mountaintops is about the most absurd they'll get outside of gags. So in terms of scale, the two do match fairly well, and obviously in terms of what they bring, you've got a robot and a servant, both of which naturally are extremely strong and can wreak havoc on the environment by tossing each other around. And also, they have a lot of weapons. Megatron has various laser weapons, chest nipples, and rockets, and Moriarty carries around a coffin with guns, missiles, and lasers on his person at all times. You can also have Megatron turn into a T-Rex at various points, which would completely change up the dynamic of the fight. What really sells this matchup to me, the music potential. Fate has a banging OST, especially Grand Order where Moriarty comes from, which combines some of the best tracks from across the franchise, including Extra, Extella, Unlimited Blade Works, Hollow Ataraxia, Zero, Garden of Sinners, The Mistake, Apocrypha, and a ton of originals. And Beast Wars has an underspoken but fairly decent OST as well. I mean, it's a bit generic at points, but it's not bad. But what really sells this matchup to me is the dialogue potential and the strategic minds of these two characters. I would love to see these two interacting. They're both so affluent and pompous in their deliveries and how they talk, always as if they know that they're better than you, and they're explicitly making sure that you know they're talking down at you. These two can throw out insults while talking themselves up and just progressively going from playfully coy to genuinely angry with each other as the fight progresses. All the while they're coming up with strategies and game plans on the fly to one up the other. You might even be able to work in Moriarty's final world-destroying asteroid in the ending if you're creative, and have Moriarty take the battle to a location where it makes sense. I would love to see these two have at it, and that's why this is a matchup I definitely would rather as a death battle than as a DBX or something. To have that chance at voice acting and see how they pull it off, yeah. I mean, they could also just have Kingdom Megatron and have the guy running around being a massive fucking simp with the most generic henchman voice that ever henched a man. Don't do that. But yeah, this matchup introduces a franchise long awaited joint death battle, giving them new blood to royally fuck up, and brings in a new facet of an underused franchise with one of its most iconic and beloved characters who shares the name of another character, which is bound to draw in views from people who didn't pay attention to the thumbnail. I didn't write an ending to my segment. Fuck.
Tom vs. Wile E is not one of my go-to usually, but the more I thought about it, the more I realised I want it a lot more than I initially thought. While I do prefer some other big cartoon matchups like Felix the Cat vs. Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, or Mickey Mouse vs. Bugs Bunny, I ultimately sided with this because Felix vs. Oswald is an episode I struggle to envision a style for when it comes to writing and action, while Bugs vs. Mickey is pretty much confirmed, so I need not waste my second slot on it. Tom vs. Wile E, meanwhile, would be two characters duking it out, but hurting themselves more than hurting the other. Just imagine all their weapons backfiring. The idea of having a death battle where neither actually hurt the other until the killing blow sounds so funny. You could even have a climax where they turn themselves into sentient constellations and duke it out among the stars. I just said among, oh my god. Also, it would be a silent death battle. Neither of them talk, relying on expression work and sound design. That might sound like a downgrade, but if they're able to make the fight look authentic, it has potential to be as funny as the likes of Hercule vs. Dan in my opinion. It is for this though that it needs to be a hand-drawn episode. Sprites simply don't do it justice, neither do 3D models. We've seen Tom work in 3D in the new movie, but that was with a super high budget. Simply put, they need to embrace their roots here. This isn't a Danny vs. Jake situation where a sprite battle can still do it justice well enough. I also really enjoy the contrast in their fighting styles. Tom is far more aggressive and quick to action, while Wile E tends to take things slower and set up elaborate traps that take a simple rope cut to activate, for example. Seeing these two very different styles of slapstick clash would be so much fun. That really is the best way I can think to describe this episode. It just sounds like dumb fun, and there's little more I need in a death battle between two characters like this.
Freddy Krueger vs. Pennywise is ultimately the horror movie match I'd want to see most on Death Battle. Don't think I haven't thought about all of the others. Jason Voorhees vs. Michael Myers and Chucky vs. Slappy are both great, and I would like to see them on the show eventually. But I think this match has the potential to be the most creative, entertaining, and grand fight of the bunch. Having characters as powerful as these two kick off their usage of horror movies for Death Battle just seems right to me. Off the bat, just seeing these two get analyzed would be so cool. I'd love to hear Wiz and Boomstick talk about Freddy and Pennywise. Freddy Krueger is one of my all-time favorite characters, so seeing him get analyzed like this, and then given a really cool animation with a cool soundtrack, it just sounds like a dream come true to me. Speaking of the animation, I pitched that it would be sprite animated, and not live action. Live action just seems like it would limit them, and it has the potential to just look wrong. Freddy already has two different well-done sprite sheets, and I could see them commissioning a Pennywise sprite sheet. Mine are not nearly good enough for Death Battle standards. These two are among the strongest horror movie characters ever, and seeing their reality warping powers be used against each other could make for an impressive animation. I could see Freddy using the power glove to make Pennywise bash his head into the wall, only for Pennywise to smile like he did in It Chapter 2 when he killed the skateboard kid. Of course, Freddy will make several cheesy puns, something I'm sure Boomstick will appreciate. Pennywise could morph into several characters from Freddy's past, like his daughter, wife, Nancy, and maybe even Jason and Ash to reference those crossovers. If the two just keep trying to one-up each other, trying their best to get fear out of their opponent, I think it would be really cool when it finally pays off, and the loser becomes afraid of the winner. Speaking of, I'm pretty sure Pennywise would ultimately win. If you've seen my multiverse match video on this fight, you could get more detail. But I think he ultimately wins. Though I would be alright if Death Battle decided Freddy won. Anyways, that's my pick. I'm praying for it to eventually happen.
I've said my piece on Sans vs Korosensei in a previous video, minus my thought on the winner, which I'm still unable to get into right now. To stop myself from repeating what I've said before verbatim, I'll just put the connections on screen and focus more on what I'd want from the fight. The fight should be done in sprites. Given Undertale's entire art style and Koro possibly leading to some good sprite rigging, I think it could work. This is the sprite battle that I want the most, which is why I went with this over Maui vs Hercules or Deoxys vs Boros. The reason for them to fight writes itself. Sans can sense a person's level of violence and how many people they've killed. Koro used to be an assassin. Koro could perceive Sans attacking him as an attempt to get the 10 billion yen bounty on his head so he plays along. It shouldn't be too difficult. Plus, Koro having no reason to go all out right off the bat could be a good way to show how his super defensive fighting style clashes with Sans' heavy focus on overwhelming offense. Obviously I want the speed of both characters to be conveyed well, that's kind of their whole thing. They should realistically both be dodging most of what the other throws at them, but given Sans' frailty and Koro's regeneration, Sans should be still landing the majority of the hits. Koro can still land some given how weak his slaps are, but not too many. You could have him create a tornado which Sans has to ride his Gaster Blasters to avoid. You could have Sans keep Koro still with his telekinesis to land some good hits. Have him turn Korosensei blue to disable his flight. Have Sans trap Koro in a cage of bones only for him to bust out with his big energy burst. Maybe even incorporate the missile that Koro has in there somewhere. There's a lot you could do here. But of course, the big thing that I'd be looking for here is good banter. With characters as comical as this, I'd want this to be one of the funniest death battles ever. Sans could make a bunch of puns, and Koro, finding him amusing, could join him. Maybe Sans could have some fourth wall breaks in the fight. If there's a fake out, he could say that he knows Koro's still alive because the music's still going. I'd want the ending to be really emotional regardless of who dies. Both of these characters mean so much to so many people, and their canon deaths are some of the biggest emotional gut punches of their respective series. And given both of their reluctances to kill, it wouldn't feel right having one of them just instantly laser the other to death and make a quirky joke afterwards. And the final thing that I'd want is a moment near the end where they both get fully serious. The jokes stop, the music changes, the entire tone of the fight takes a complete 180, as Sans' pupils disappear and Koro's face turns completely black with glowing red eyes. Both now out to finish this as quickly as possible. A moment like that could possibly even match It's Raining, You're Bleeding, Carnage is Starving, which I would be all for. Sans may be oversaturated in verses pretty much exclusively thanks to Rewind, but a fight like this could really be something special if done right. I love both of these characters, and if any death battle has a chance of making me tear up, it's this one. We've got just a few more fights left to go from here, so I'll let the others finish saying their piece, and I'll meet back up with you all for the outro.
Alright, I'm back to talk about my 3D fight for this season. Mando vs. the Predator. Also, because I know somebody's gonna friggin' bring it up, yes, the main character of The Mandalorian has an actual name, but he goes by one name, and that's Mando. So yeah, I'll be calling him Mando for this entire segment. Get it? Got it? Good. So let me go ahead and explain this fight's connections, and spoiler alert, it's not as well connected as Joker vs. Ness, but it does still have a good few connections. For one, both are intergalactic hunters with a large array of weapons and some badass armor. On top of that, both of them have a strict code that they follow, with the Mandalorian code and the Predator's rule about not hunting unarmed prey. And also, they were both in Fortnite during the same season, so hey, that's an extra fun connection. So now, why this match over one of the Predator's more popular fights? Well, for one, I fucking love The Mandalorian. That show is amazing, and I would pop off so hard if Mando got on Death Battle. Other than that, while the Arbiter and Kraven are fine enough fights for the Predator, they simply don't have as much in common with him. Like, Kraven and the Predator are just hunters, and I really don't get Arbiter versus the Predator. And let's be fair, Mando has like one other thematic fight being Joel from The Last of Us. Yeah, that's not exactly a fair fight. One's an intergalactic bounty hunter with spaceships and shit, and the other one's Joel. But ignoring all that, this fight would be sick as hell. For one, this matchup has a built-in start for the fight easily. Just have the Predator hunt down Baby Yoda and have Mando try and protect him. On top of that, this fight would just have a lot of cool back and forth using their arsenals. For example, the Predator could turn invisible, and Mando would have to use the thermal scope on his Ambam to counter it. The Predator and Mando both have multiple projectile weapons that can counter each other, such as the Plasma Caster and Mando's pistol. Hell, the Predator's Smart Disc and Mando's Songbirds could easily be used for some really cool shots where they each have to avoid the tracking weapons. But as the fight goes on, it would have to devolve into a spear fight, with the Predator using his combi stick and Mando using his Beskar spear, until eventually it devolves into the Predator using his claws and Mando using the electrified tip of the Ambam, ending with Mando finishing off the Predator with a disintegration blast from the Ambam. But beyond the actual fight scene, this match actually has the chance of being a really close fight, or a complete and utter stomp. It really just depends on what you believe in for Mando, but either way, Mando would come out on top, because at bare minimum, these guys are hitting multi-city block, but Mando's massively faster than light thanks to piloting spaceships, whereas the Predator's only hypersonic, I think? But if you want to buy into some of the higher tier stuff, Mando did go toe-to-toe with Ahsoka, who's a pretty powerful Jedi, and he did almost completely push through Baby Yoda's force barrier that was sending shockwaves throughout the entire galaxy. So yeah, Mando could end up completely fucking destroying the Predator, or having a fairly close fight with him, depending on what you want to use. So yeah, that's why I picked Mando vs. the Predator for my 3D fight. Just the sheer potential of a fight between the most feared hunter in the universe and a bounty hunter who's well equipped to counter any situation could honestly lend itself to one of the most badass fights of all time. Although I have also seen Death Battle waste a lot of potential before, so honestly just fingers crossed that it'd be good, but I'd honestly just be happy with my favorite Star Wars character getting onto Death Battle. Also, side note, they could totally just use the Fortnite models for Mando, Baby Yoda, and the Predator for the 3D fight, which would be just dope as hell. It'd be funny and kinda cursed, but it'd also be pretty dope, because those models unironically look good.
I wanted to pick a weird, vivid sort of match for my other choice, and I think this one has a decent shot. Ronald McDonald, the mascot of McDonald's, and Colonel Sanders, the founder and mascot of KFC. Basically, it's the battle of fast food mascots that are known in pretty much every country, just about. Japan doesn't have Burger King, but that's not the only reason this isn't Ronald versus the King. The other reason I chose these two is because out of the fast food mascots, they have the most materials to draw from that makes them relatively even with each other. I chose this to be a sprite-based one because both of their Mugen sprites are pretty famous at this point, and while the DBX already did it with those, it'd be very interesting to see these sorts of characters delve deeper into. Seeing ones like McGruff, Smokey, Chuck, and Segata covered was a lot of fun, and I'd enjoy seeing them cover more characters along those lines. If I had my way, there'd be a ton more of this kind of match over Marvel vs. DC or Shonen Jump sort of fights. But I don't run Death Battle, and that's part of the reason they might not let me, along with other obvious problems. My instincts tell me that Ronald McDonald would win this, given that he's a magician and basically a reality warper, rearranging stars and things like that. But then again, Colonel Sanders scales to DC Heralds, baby! Well, possibly, anyways. This is a fun match that would become less fun if the determination was just, lol, DC Herald wins. And if I were saying who I think would win on average besides that, I'm going to have to say that I still lean towards Ronald. He has more inherent and surprisingly consistent abilities. It sucked that a real person lost to this goofy being, but Colonel Sanders has been deceased for a while, and actual KFC seems willing to essentially make him a cartoon character anyways.
Hello gamers, I'm back, it's me Dude. I'm going to talk about my choice for a 3D fight, which is also the finale, which is pretty epic. Spawn vs Ghost Rider. Both are comic book anti-heroes who are once ordinary men, but after the bad shit decided to happen in their lives, they decided to make a deal with the devil. After making this deal, they were transformed to Hellspawns as well as pawns in this devil's game. However, both broke free of their chains and eventually overruled Hell itself. Both can use the sins of their opponents against them, as well as chains. And with these powers, they rival gods and other overpowered beings. Also, Angle vs Devil. This has been a matchup for fucking years, and it's very easy to see why. Not only are the connections really good, the fight potential kind of do be as epic. Given the amount of fucking bullshit these two can pull off, and given Yoda vs King Mickey's existence, as well as Gandalf vs Dracula, I can say I trust the Source Filmmaker team on this. I feel as if they are, better with this sort of matchup than, say, fucking... And with this hypothetical season putting this matchup at the finale, that means more time can be spent on it, which means, it'll be a better episode overall. Because, the finales have a very good track record. Like, come on, there's only like 2 shit episodes. Well done. As for who I think wins, Ghost Rider. In base form, they should be pretty evenly matched, but once Zarathos comes out, Spawn is kind of fucked. Sure, it still has their all cool hacks and stuff, but Zarathos runs fast and hits hard, and Spawn die. This leads into the death itself, which, if done correctly, can be some of the coolest fucking shit Death Battle has, ever done. Because I generally want it to be similar to Lobo's death, only, far more intense and cinematic, as Spawn tries to fight back against the penance there, but all of his sins catch up to him, and he's eventually soul-vored, and his body just crumbles to dust in Zarathos' hands, and Zarathos says a cool line or something, and then, he does a Fortnite dance, and he flosses, and it'd be really funny. Oh, speaking of funny, you can have this really epic joke where Boomstick says to Sadman that the nickname that Spawn is given by Wanda's daughter is also the name of the dad, because dad is sad and he left. It'd be really fucking funny. Yeah, that's it for me, gamers. I'm gonna fucking dip.
So, that was our collaborative effort Death Battle season list. I'd like to give a thanks to all my friends who helped with this project. In order of appearance, that's Nemesis, Combo Breaker, Sided, Max, Ribbit Theater, Brandon, and Ducko. They were all big helps in getting this project out. Nemesis and Ducko even edited over their segments when I told them they didn't need to, so extra thanks to them for that. And a further thanks to Brandon for making this amazing thumbnail. Go check all their channels out, they make a wide variety of versus stuff. From reviews, to their own versus shows, to trailers, to even a grilled cheese tutorial with Persona 5 music playing over it. Sure. Of course, I'm not expecting anyone to connect with all of these matches here. Despite liking all of them to an extent, excluding my own matches, I could probably count on one hand the amount of episodes here I'd be personally invested in. But that was kind of the goal with this. Not to make a season where every match was going to appeal to everyone, just to make one that casts a net wide enough to where hopefully everyone has at least one they'd be excited for. And thankfully my circle of close friends has a wide enough range of interest to where I think we've probably achieved that. We had a horror film buff, 2 Nintendo fans who were also fucking weebs, a boomer who doesn't like anything released after the 1640s, a kaiju fan, a fan of traditional hand-drawn animation, and Sided was there as well. With such a wide variety of matches, this gave me ample room to dedicate one of my spots to a funny inside joke match. Though given how frequently my most wanted matches change, if I was to redo my segment I likely would have had Phantom Virus vs LG Rhythm as the honourable mention there, instead of Slenderman vs Octodad. And since the order wasn't gone over in the actual segment, since that was mostly my call, I'll briefly explain some of them here. Destoroyah vs Iris is the one I chose as the season premiere, since a kaiju fight seems like the right kind of match to get people excited for what's to come. Mordecai and Rigby vs Finn and Jake is what I chose to end the first half of the season before the break, due to it being a massive rivalry match that's been around for years. That's also why Kirk vs Han is the match leading back into the season once the break ends. Freddy vs Pennywise and Sans vs Coral are monster matches on opposite ends of the horror spectrum, and I put those around where I thought Halloween would probably be. And then the finale was Ghost Rider vs Spawn, one of the biggest legacy matches of the whole show. It's not quite on the level of Kirk vs. Han in that regard, but I think it's more than worthy of being the finale with how over the top it could be in terms of spectacle, given that these two are undoubtedly the strongest characters on this entire season list and it's not even remotely close. Well, except for maybe its true form. But Ghost Rider's a Marvel Comics character, I don't doubt that he's been given some bullshit over the years. Also, in terms of series used, a 16 episode season has potential to use up to 32 series. This one would use 31, with the only repeat being Star Wars. And given how different Han and Mando are, I think that's more than fair. Also, out of these 31 series, most of them are new. It would introduce 21 new series, only reusing 10. And even then, out of those 10 returning series, 7 of them have only been on once or twice, many of which only being in older episodes. And I think that Beast Wars and Persona 5 are different enough from G1 Transformers and Persona 3, to where they could essentially be counted as new series. So really, it's more like 23 new series and 8 returners. This means that every single match here either uses a new series, gives a new perspective on a returner, or it does both. Would this be a lot for one season? Yeah, definitely. But this isn't exactly a Season 9 wishlist or anything, just a fun hypothetical to see what kind of season list we could make with our vastly different tastes in matchups. It was a fun project to work on, and I really hope this kind of thing catches on. I'd love to see different versions of this same concept. If any other videos like this one exist, then link them in the comments, I'd love to check them out. Anyway, this is where I'll end the video off. Go check out the channels of everyone that helped me out with this project. The links for all of them will be in the description. I don't know what to have as a closing line, so bye.
I'm not doing the dance!